Waikiki Beach in Hawaii was always the picture of paradise white sand, clear waters, and warm sun. It was exactly what Mary Thompson needed after her husband's sudden passing. Seeking some peace, she took a solo trip to Hawaii, hoping to shake the weight of grief. But the trip would soon turn into a nightmare that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Mary arrived at the hotel on a Friday evening. The soft hum of the ocean and the gentle rustling of palm trees promised tranquility. She thought a few days on the beach would clear her mind, a momentary escape from the sorrow that had overtaken her life. But the first night, as she gazed at the stars above, something seemed off, almost like the ocean was watching her. On the second day, Mary ventured into the waters. The sun was shining, the temperature was perfect, and everything seemed calm. She swam out into the surf, letting the water lap around her and carry away her worries. But after an hour, she began to feel that same unsettling sensation. She was being watched, as if something under the surface was aware of her presence. She glanced over her shoulder and saw it. A shape beneath the water, large and shifting, moving at the same pace as her strokes. At first, she thought it was a shadow from a school of fish or maybe a stray swimmer. But the longer she swam, the more she realized that it wasn't natural. There was something wrong with the way it moved. The shadow grew larger. She could feel her heartbeat quicken as the water grew inexplicably colder. Her mind raced, but she tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, or perhaps she was just imagining things. But the feeling of dread didn't dissipate. Then she saw it clearly. A pale figure broke through the water just behind her. The face was horrifying white, gaunt, with hollow eyes that stared right through her. The figure's long limbs moved unnaturally, twisting and contorting with every stroke. She froze, paralyzed by fear. It wasn't just a swimmer. It was something that shouldn't exist. Her heart slammed against her ribcage as she tried to swim back to shore. The figure followed with terrifying speed. It didn't need to move its legs, just glided along. Its eyes locked on hers. She couldn't escape. The closer she got to the beach, the harder it was to breathe, as though the water itself was holding her back. She finally stumbled onto the sand, gasping for air. When she turned to look back, the figure was gone. The ocean was calm, as if nothing had ever happened, but Mary knew it wasn't over. That night, she lay in her hotel room, trying to shake off the haunting image of the ghostly swimmer. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw its hollow eyes staring at her. She heard the whispers of the ocean. In the days that followed, Mary tried to forget, but the nightmares persisted. She would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. The image of the pale swimmer burned into her mind. No matter where she went, the fear clung to her. The ocean's call became irresistible, and each time she heard the sound of crashing waves, she felt the pull, as if the swimmer was waiting for her to return to the water. Mary left Hawaii, but the terror followed her. Back home, she couldn't escape it. Every beach she visited, every pool, the sensation would creep up on her. She would hear it in the wind, in the rhythmic flow of water. The figure waited, and no matter how far she went, she couldn't outrun it. Now, years later, Mary can't even stand near the ocean. The fear has consumed her life. She remains trapped in her own mind, a prisoner of the ghostly swimmer that haunts her, forever waiting beneath the water's surface. Santa Monica Beach is famous for its vibrant pier, breathtaking views, and lively crowds. But for Kyle Jennings, the summer of 2019 would mark the beginning of a nightmare that he could never escape. What started as a fun getaway with friends quickly turned into a horrifying experience that would haunt his every waking moment. On the first day, the group of friends enjoyed the usual fun, playing volleyball, laughing, and soaking up the sun. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow on the ocean, Kyle decided to take a walk by himself along the quieter, isolated part of the beach. It was the perfect way to clear his head after a long day. The air was crisp and the sky darkened as he walked, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore offering a calming backdrop. As Kyle ventured farther from the pier, he noticed something strange in the sand footprints leading into the water. He paused. No one had walked here recently, and there was something unsettling about the way the prints seemed to stop and then start again, leading straight into the ocean. He followed the trail, his curiosity getting the better of him. The further he walked, the more the air seemed to thicken, growing colder with every step. The sound of the ocean seemed to fade, replaced by an unnatural silence that sent a chill down his spine. It felt as though the beach itself was holding its breath. The footprints led him to a small, secluded cove where the moonlight cast an eerie glow on the water. And then he heard it, the whispers. Faint at first, barely audible, like the wind rustling through the sand. But as he stood there, the voices grew louder, more distinct, and unmistakably human. They were speaking, urging him to come closer. Kyle froze, his blood running cold. The whispers weren't just in the wind, they were in his mind. He turned to leave, but the sand beneath his feet began to shift, pulling him toward the water. It wasn't just the beach that seemed to call him, it was something beneath the earth, something ancient and powerful. Panic surged through Kyle as the whispers became shrill, begging him to listen, to understand. He glanced down and saw a strange symbol half buried in the sand, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The symbol seemed to pulse with energy, almost like it was alive, drawing him closer. He reached out to touch it, and instantly, the sand around him began to swirl, as if coming to life. Before he could react, the sand pulled him to the ground, wrapping around his legs. He struggled, but the more he fought, the tighter it gripped him. The whispers became a maddening cacophony, filling his mind with visions of darkness and dread. It was as though the beach itself was consuming him, dragging him into its depths. Kyle finally broke free, stumbling back toward the pier, his heart pounding. He could still hear the whispers, faint but persistent, calling his name. His friends found him hours later, shivering uncontrollably on the shore, his eyes wild with terror. They tried to console him, but it was clear that something was wrong. From that night forward, the whispers never stopped. Every night, they echoed in his mind, dragging him deeper into madness. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat. The voices were always there, beckoning him to return to the beach, to the symbol buried in the sand. Kyle's life became a living nightmare, and the once vibrant Santa Monica Beach was now a place of pure terror. Maria and her boyfriend Jason had been planning their dream trip to Ibiza for months. After months of hard work, stress, and the weight of life's demands, they were finally able to escape to the famous island in Spain. The stunning beaches, turquoise waters, and vibrant nightlife were the perfect cure for their weary souls. Little did they know, their escape would soon become a nightmare from which they would never wake. They spent their first few days in the heart of the island, indulging in the fun and freedom that Ibiza was known for. Sunsets, beach parties, and strolls down the iconic streets made them feel like they had entered paradise. But the more they explored the island, the more they realized there was something mysterious about the quieter, more secluded parts of Ibiza, the places where few ventured. One afternoon, after a long day of reveling, they decided to find a secret, untouched cove they'd heard about from a local fisherman. He had described it as the perfect escape from the crowds, a tranquil place where one could feel alone with the sea. They rented a small boat to take them there, eager for some peace away from the lively nightlife. The boat ride was peaceful. The rhythmic sound of the water against the boat was almost hypnotic. As they neared the cove, Jason could feel a strange energy in the air. The water was a perfect shade of deep blue, the kind that seemed to stretch on forever. The beach was secluded, surrounded by high cliffs that made it almost unreachable by land. The sand was untouched, pristine, as if it had been waiting for them. As they set foot on the shore, they noticed how quiet the place was. No birds, no distant hum of traffic or voices, just the gentle sound of waves breaking on the shore. It felt like they had stepped into another world, one where time didn't exist. Despite the beauty of the place, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was an oppressive silence that weighed on him, a sense of isolation that felt too perfect to be real. Maria, on the other hand, was already smiling, carefree as she kicked off her shoes and ran toward the water. She called out to Jason, urging him to join her. But Jason hesitated, standing at the edge of the sand, his eyes scanning the empty cove. There was something unsettling about the stillness. Maria waded into the water, letting the coolness wash over her. Jason finally shook off his unease and followed her, stepping into the clear water. The sensation was refreshing, but as they swam farther out, Jason felt the temperature drop suddenly. He looked at Maria, but she was too far ahead, her laughter echoing across the water. Jason's discomfort grew as the water around him became colder, and the sunlight seemed to dim. He stopped swimming and looked below the surface. It was a calm, almost surreal scene, but he couldn't help but notice strange dark shapes moving beneath the water. They were long and shadowy, undulating through the deep in a way that didn't seem natural. Jason's heart began to race. "Maria, let's go back," he called out, but his voice felt small against the vastness of the cove. Maria didn't hear him. She was lost in the moment, too far ahead to notice the change in the water. Jason's instincts screamed at him to leave, but as he tried to turn back toward the shore, he was paralyzed with fear. The shapes beneath the water were getting closer, moving with purpose. He could see them more clearly now, long, pale figures, their bodies twisted and fluid, as if they didn't belong to this world. Their eyes, though, were the worst part. They glowed faintly, like embers in the dark depths. Jason's breath quickened. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He tried to swim faster, but the water felt heavy, like it was pulling him down. His panic set in as the figures drew nearer, their movement almost predatory. He looked back at Maria, who was now out of sight, unaware of the growing danger behind her. The water around him turned icy, and with each stroke, it became harder to move. His limbs felt stiff, as though the ocean itself was trying to trap him. He fought against the current, but it felt like the sea was pushing him deeper. His eyes frantically searched for Maria, but the shadows beneath the water were now all he could see, unfathomable and terrifying. "Maria!" he screamed, his voice desperate, but there was no answer. He forced himself to look towards the shore, where the sand seemed so distant now. Panic surged through his chest. He couldn't breathe. The shadows beneath the water began to rise, their forms becoming clearer, glistening, pale and inhuman. It was then that Jason realized they were not alone. Suddenly, he saw Maria's figure, but it wasn't the carefree girl who had been laughing just moments ago. She was struggling beneath the water, her body jerking violently as something unseen dragged her down. Jason's heart stopped as he watched her body disappear beneath the waves, her terrified scream drowned out by the sound of the ocean. Frantically, Jason dove under the water, determined to save her, but as he swam deeper, the shadows surrounded him. The water was no longer cold, it was freezing. He reached out blindly, but his hands met nothing but empty space. Every breath felt like it would be his last, the pressure building in his chest as he was pulled further into the abyss. In the distance, Jason saw Maria again. Her eyes were wide open, staring back at him in sheer terror, but she was no longer alive. The ocean had claimed her. The shadows closed in. Jason fought against the pull, but it was too strong. The last thing he saw was Maria's face, her eyes pleading for him to escape. But the darkness of the sea was relentless, swallowing him whole. Days later, Maria's body washed ashore, found lifeless and cold. Jason, however, was never found. His name was soon added to the list of those who had vanished without a trace in the mysterious cove of Ibiza. The locals still tell stories of the dark waters, the cursed place where the sea's depths hide ancient horrors. No one dares to venture near the cove anymore, for it is said that the spirits of those who drowned there still haunt the waters. The ocean in Ibiza has a way of claiming those who venture too deep, and once it takes someone, they are never seen again.